Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got a big one today. Your stack of sources on starting creative projects, especially those excerpts you send over from David Kadavy's The Heart to Start.
Oh yeah, this one's going deep.
So are we ready to unlock some serious motivation and break free from those mental blocks that keep our art locked inside?
It's incredible, isn't it? How much we can get in our own way. But yeah, let's dive into Kadavy's insights on things like the fear of judgment, the allure of perfectionism.
I think he had a really interesting way to kind of set the stage in this book.
Yeah, how'd you like that opening?
I thought it was great. He compares making art to physics.
Oh yeah, I remember that part.
He says, just as there are laws that govern how high a rubber ball will bounce, there are also laws that govern whether you will make your art.
It really makes you think differently about it. Like, it's not just some mystical thing, you know?
Yeah.
There are principles at play that we can understand and work with.
Right, not just fight against.
Exactly.
So let's jump in.
All right, where do we start?
Well, first up, right out of the gate, there is art inside you. A man Kadavy's story about feeling ready to die after launching his book.
Intense, right?
It's like completing that creative act brought this huge sense of purpose. Like it was all he needed to do in life.
Yeah, it really speaks to this deep human need for self-actualization, doesn't it? And it's not just Kadavy. I mean, folks like screenwriter John Bokenkamp say the same thing. Expressing your unique voice, doing it through art, is core to becoming who you really are. It's like defining expectations, tapping into that creative energy we all have, but often ignore.
And it's more than just, feeling good, right?
Yeah.
Kadavy suggests that this pent-up creativity, if it doesn't have an outlet, can turn negative.
Oh, absolutely. It's got to go somewhere. He compares it to Helen Keller's outburst before she learned language. It's like that, right?
It really is. Like we're wired to create, to shape the world around us. And when we ignore that urge, it can lead to all sorts of frustration. I think this is especially relevant now, With work changing so fast, automation on the rise, connecting with our creative side is more important than ever.
Couldn't agree more. That creative spark, it's what makes us human. It's what helps us adapt and thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
Now, Kadavy calls this whole process art is self-actualization. But he makes it clear that the path isn't always obvious.
Oh, for sure. You don't just wake up one morning and poof, you're self-actualized.
He tells the story of Jodi Ettenberg, who starts this travel blog, but it's through the writing that she discovers her passion for food and also her struggles with celiac disease. Like the art itself revealed those things.
Right. Sometimes you don't need the complete self-portrait before you start creating. Sometimes the act of creation helps you figure out who you are and what truly matters to you.
Okay, so there's this idea that keeps popping up in the book, this tug of war between our ego and our true selves.
Right, and Kadavy's point is that our ego, while it thinks it's protecting us, can end up sabotaging our creative expression. It's not about being arrogant, it's about being afraid.
Fear of judgment, fear of failure, powerful forces.
They really are. He uses Sean Stevenson as an example. Incredible guy. Despite some serious physical limitations, he's accomplished amazing things. Why? Because he refused to let fear call the shots.
And Stevenson also made this insightful point about how often criticizing other people is a way for our ego to feel superior.
Oh, totally.
It's like we deflect our own insecurities by putting others down instead of facing them head on.
Classic defense mechanism. It's about recognizing when those ego excuses are holding us back and choosing self-compassion instead.
And it made me think about Kadavy's own story, about feeling trapped in that beige life, right?
Yeah.
He had a job and a relationship that just weren't fulfilling him. And it took real courage to confront those fears, own what he truly desired, and take that leap of faith to break free.
And that brings us to the next big piece of the puzzle. Finding the fuel. What is the driving force behind our art?
And Kadavy starts with a deceptively simple idea. Curiosity first. He talks about filling his early days as a freelancer with activities that genuinely intrigued him, even if they weren't directly related to work, like just letting himself explore.
It's something we could all benefit from, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about the last time you completely lost track of time doing something you were genuinely curious about. That feeling,
Right.
That's the good stuff.
That's the fuel. We're often pressured as adults to just exploit our existing skills, as author Ian Leslie puts it, instead of exploring new things. But we need both, don't we?
Absolutely. We need to keep exploring to keep that creative spark alive. It reminds me of that classic Steve Jobs anecdote, the one about him dropping in on a calligraphy class. Years later, it influenced the design of the Macintosh. It's like totally unrelated interests coming together to create something unique and impactful.
It shows that curiosity isn't just about feeling good. it can be a real competitive advantage. In a world where everyone's striving to stand out, following your own unique path of curiosity can lead to things no one else could have even imagined.
And it's interesting. This is where things start to get a little more, I don't know, mystical, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Kadavy brings up this idea of the voice. Those whispers of ideas that we tend to brush aside.
The ones we tell ourselves are silly or not worth pursuing.
Exactly. And he even admits to missing out on some huge opportunities. Things like, get this, the like button, and a food photo sharing app.
Wow. Talk about kicking yourself. Right.
All because he didn't trust his gut, those initial whispers of intuition.
He links this to the idea of puncturing the vacuum, which is a pretty powerful image. He's saying that big, groundbreaking ideas often happen when someone taps into what people are already thinking or feeling, but haven't quite articulated yet.
Right, like they're giving voice to something that was already simmering beneath the surface.
Exactly. Think Elvis, Impressionism, even Harry Potter. They all expressed something that was already there, waiting to be unleashed.
So how do we become better at listening to that voice, tuning into those whispers, those what-if moments that so often get dismissed? I mean, does Kadavy have some kind of magic formula?
He doesn't offer any quick fixes, but he really stresses the importance of paying attention. Those fleeting thoughts, the flashes of inspiration, don't let them slip away. Write them down, explore them, even if they seem ridiculous at first.
And realizing, too, that not every idea is going to be a winner.
Yeah.
Right? It's about being willing to experiment, to try things out, and see what sticks.
As he says, it's better to be right 1 time out of 100 than to be right 0 times out of 0. Got to play the numbers game sometimes.
Now, this next one gets a little, how do I put this out there?
Let's hear it.
He talks about something called the pump. This physical sensation, excitement, fear, strong emotion that he believes signals a powerful idea.
Interesting. It's like a visceral response.
Yes. He even goes so far as to say that art is a form of telepathy, like a transmission of emotion from the artist to the audience.
I see where he's going with this. It's about authenticity, right? When you're genuinely moved by an idea, when you can feel that pump in your own body, it's more likely to resonate with others.
Exactly. It's tapping into that raw energy and channeling it through your work.
Yeah.
And get this, Kadavy actually creates this super monotonous routine for himself. Like his life is hyper-structured.
Why would he do that?
Because he believes it makes him more sensitive to those shifts in energy and emotion.
Like he's built a laboratory to amplify those creative sparks.
Right, which makes you think, what can you do to shape your environment, to support your own creative process?
It's not always about waiting for inspiration to strike. Sometimes you can actively create the conditions that invite it in.
And speaking of conditions, that leads us to this crucial question of resilience. What keeps us going when things get tough? Kadavy dives into that with that which pulls you through.
The fuel that keeps the fire burning.
He describes writing his first book, The Isolation, the Heartache. And this line from a song kept him going. He just kept repeating it. Live through this and you won't look back.
Powerful stuff. Because creative work isn't always glamorous, right? There's doubt, frustration, even despair sometimes. You need that anchor, that inner strength to help you weather the storms.
And that anchor, it can be different for everyone. Kadavy talks about J.K. Rowling writing Harry Potter through some incredibly difficult circumstances. And then there's Elise Bauer creating simply recipes while dealing with this debilitating illness. It's like sometimes hardship can be a catalyst for creativity. It forces you to dig deep.
It's not about romanticizing hardship, of course, but about recognizing that it can push us to tap into reserves of strength we didn't even know we had. And Kadavy also emphasizes the power of generosity, of connecting with a purpose bigger than yourself.
Oh, like what Seth Godin says. Generosity is the antidote to fear. When we're creating something to serve others, that fear tends to take a back seat.
Right. Shifting the focus away from your own ego towards a desire to contribute can be incredibly motivating. And it makes us more resilient, too. So now let's get into the practical stuff. How do we actually start creating?
Because it can be so daunting, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Kadavy tackles this head-on with a concept he calls the Fortress Fallacy. It's this trap of dreaming so big, getting caught up in envisioning this perfect masterpiece, that we end up getting paralyzed, just frozen by the sheer size of the thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. I can totally relate to that. I remember when I was a kid, I think I was maybe 10, I wanted to write a book.
So what happened?
Well, I got so overwhelmed just thinking about the final product that I couldn't even get past the first line.
I think he mentions that in the book, right? Like trying to build a fortress but never actually laying a single brick.
Exactly. It's such a great analogy. So how do we, escape that trap?
The key is to break it down. Instead of getting lost in the grandeur of the whole project, ask yourself, what's one tiny brick you can lay today? What's one small step you can take to move forward?
It makes you think about what those business cards are in our own lives.
Right, those seemingly insignificant things that we could start doing today.
He gives the example of Hugh MacLeod. Didn't he start sketching on business cards because he'd forgotten his notebook?
That's the one. And those small acts of creation, they eventually blossomed into a whole career.
It's inspiring. Those little things can have such a ripple effect.
They really can. And it highlights this crucial point. Don't get hung up on perfection. Embrace those early messy attempts. In fact, Kadavy even calls it, and I love this phrase, permission to suck.
That is such a great phrase. It's so liberating. Because, let's face it, we all start that, right?
We all suck at the beginning. It's part of the process. It actually reminds me of that Ira Glass quote about the gap between our taste and our early skills. We all create stuff at first that doesn't quite meet our own standards, but that's okay. The key is to keep creating, keep refining those skills, and eventually that gap will shrink.
And Kadavy actually shares this kind of embarrassing story about his first blog post. He's like, it was full of errors, lacked any real substance.
But you know what? It was the spark.
It ignited his whole career.
Exactly. Sometimes all it takes is putting something out there, however imperfect. It can be the catalyst we need to get moving.
And that brings us to another challenge I think a lot of us face, which is this myth of linear progress.
Oh, yeah. You mean like expecting everything to unfold in a neat step-by-step way?
Exactly. Kadavy calls it the linear work distortion.
And it's just not how creative work happens, is it?
Rarely. For me, it's always messy, full of twists and turns.
He uses his experience writing his first book as an example. He initially tried to force himself to stick to this rigid daily word count, but it just felt wrong. It felt stifling.
So if you're listening and feeling stuck, maybe it's time to question those expectations.
Right. Who says there's only one right way to create?
Exactly. We need to find what works for us, even if it seems messy or unconventional.
He realized that his process was way more iterative, back and forth, with lots of dead ends and restarts.
That's so reassuring to hear.
He mentioned screenwriter John Bokenkamp, who uses a similar approach, starting with stream of consciousness writing, just getting everything out, and then gradually shaping those raw ideas into a structured script.
Okay, I want to talk about something that I think is a universal struggle.
What's that?
Procrastination.
Ah, yes. The ultimate creative killer.
Kadavy has this whole chapter dedicated to it called Inflating the Investment. It's this thing we do, overestimating how much time and effort something will take, and then using that as an excuse to just put it off.
Like convincing ourselves we don't have enough time to read, so we'll just scroll through social media instead.
I'm so guilty of that.
But the thing is, as Kadavy points out, even a few minutes of reading can be so much more enriching than hours of mindless scrolling.
That's so true. It's all about perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So for our listeners out there, think about this. What are some investments that you might be inflating in your own life? How could you reframe those activities into smaller, more manageable chunks?
He shares this great technique he learned from his friend Nick Gray. Nick stacks a pile of books and then just skims through them until one grabs his attention.
It's about lowering that barrier to entry.
Right, making it easier to get started without feeling overwhelmed by this huge commitment.
I love that approach. It reminds us that you don't need to have a massive block of uninterrupted time to make progress.
Small, consistent efforts add up over time.
Absolutely.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Kadavy introduces this concept called Motivational Judo. It's basically using your own ego against itself to overcome resistance.
Now that sounds intriguing.
He actually confesses to using a 10-minute timer to trick himself into writing.
Seriously, a 10-minute timer?
Yep. It's such a small, achievable goal that his ego can't justify putting it off.
It's brilliant, and it really speaks to the power of those small victories, because sometimes all we need is to get over that initial hump. Then the momentum takes over.
Right. So instead of saying, I'm going to write for an hour, which can feel really daunting, you say, I'm just going to write for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, okay, I could do that.
It reminds me of that research by Dan Ariely on cheating, how we tend to rationalize our behavior to maintain a positive self-image. So by setting these small, easily achievable goals, we're actually making it harder for our ego to justify procrastination.
We're outsmarting ourselves. And Kadavy also makes this point about finding that sweet spot, between challenge and self-compassion.
Right. what works for one person might not work for another. Like, he contrasts the timer trick with those more extreme approaches. Remember that Pavlov wristband? The one that delivers electric shocks if you don't follow through on a commitment.
Oh, yeah. That's a bit intense for me.
Yeah. Right. It's like, find what works for you. Understand your own psychology, your personal patterns of resistance, and figure out the strategies that help you overcome them. Even Kadavy says what worked for him in the past might not work for him now, as he's developed new habits and disciplines. It's this ongoing process of self-discovery.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more concept that I thought was super powerful. He calls it cracking the whip.
Okay, I'm curious, how does that work?
It's this analogy he uses to explain how we can approach creative projects in a way that almost generates its own momentum.
So like the momentum of a whip, building from the base to the tip.
Yes. He's suggesting that you start with the easiest, most enjoyable part of the project, the part that really gets you fired up, and then let that initial energy carry you through the more challenging parts.
That makes sense. So start with the fun stuff.
He uses the example of Cards Against Humanity. It started as a simple PDF of cards shared online. It wasn't until the game gained popularity organically that they invested in manufacturing and distribution.
What a great example. So sometimes the best way to win is to just start playing. And there are so many examples of that, right? Like that crack the whip approach.
Yeah. What else does he mention?
Well, like Simply Recipes, which, believe it or not, started as Elise Bauer's personal recipe collection.
Oh, wow.
And then there's Museum Hack, which started with this guy, Nick Gray, just giving free tours to his friends.
It's wild how these simple things, these passion projects, can turn into something so much bigger.
It's all about that initial spark, that excitement. It's contagious.
And it makes me think about Kadavy's own journey, from that first blog post to the book deal to the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like each step builds on the one before it, a chain reaction of creative momentum.
And it reminds us that every start is a win, no matter where it leads.
Right. Even those early imperfect attempts, they're valuable lessons learned.
Exactly.
So if you're listening out there and you're feeling that pull, that urge to create, just start.
Don't overthink it. Just start.
Embrace the journey, find what fuels you, and crack that whip.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. Kadavy focuses on creative pursuits, but how can you apply these principles to any challenging goal in your life? Whether it's starting a business, learning a new skill, or breaking a bad habit, these ideas are powerful tools for change.
I love that. Because really, these principles are universal.
They are. So to recap, just so everything is crystal clear, let's revisit those 10 key takeaways we've uncovered from David Kadavy's Heart to Start.
Okay, hit me with number 1.
Number 1, everyone has art inside them, and creating it is a journey of self-discovery.
Number 2, fear and ego are powerful adversaries, but recognizing them is the first step to freedom.
Number 3, curiosity, a strong idea that resonates with you and a compelling purpose. These are the fuels that keep you going.
Number 4, don't let the Fortress Fallacy paralyze you. Start small and build from there.
Number 5, minimize the perceived investment. Break those large tasks down into smaller, more manageable steps. It makes all the difference.
Number 6, embrace the messy, nonlinear nature of creative work. There's no one right way. Find what works for you.
Number 7, give yourself permission to suck. Your early work is about learning and experimenting.
Number 8, outsmart that resistance with Motivational Judo. Set small, achievable goals to build momentum, and don't forget to celebrate those wins along the way.
Number 9, find the easiest, most enjoyable entry point to your project. Crack that whip and let that energy propel you forward.
And finally, number 10, every start is a victory, regardless of where you end up. So embrace the journey and keep creating.
We hope this deep dive has sparked something in you, giving you some new tools to tackle those projects you've been dreaming of.
Remember, the heart to start is within you.
Until next time, keep diving deep.